let's talk about the many ways that your bones change over time. Now, there's three main ways, and I'm going to go over those in kind of an overview and then go into more depth in other videos. But I'm not going to get into all the deep vocabulary, and so if you want to really cross-reference this to your terms and prior information in this unit, please read the two-page handout PDF on bone growth that's attached to lesson materials. And you can also see some animations that I posted there as well on all three forms of growth. All right, so let's get started. Your bones change in three major ways, and they continue to change really from conception all the way to death. And so there's not a time when your bones are the same as they were even a year ago. And so endochondral ossification is the first kind of change. And so that's just building bones from scratch. And our main materials that we're going to be building bones, or ingredients that we're going to be building bones out of, is hyaline cartilage. And you can see that in this 12-week-old radiograph. And so this little fetus is mostly hyaline cartilage, and that has to be ossified. So this cartilage is the same as what you would find making up a shark skeleton, if you know comparative anatomy or marine biology. And so it's very bendy and flexible and strong, but it's not very hard, and it can't withstand a lot of weight, right? Thus, it works for the shark, but not really so much for a hominid. And so the next thing we need to do is take this chondral, as in cartilage, endo as in inside, this inside cartilage, and ossify it or mineralize it and make it hard and turn it into bone. So that's the first kind of major change that your bones go through. And that starts during fetal development, and it continues after birth as we come out really kind of underdeveloped and undercooked in many ways. It continues for several months. And then we transition to appositional growth. So after we've created bone, we end up with small little holdouts of hyaline cartilage that can still grow and turn into bone, but they're restricted now to a few little regions. And some of those we've seen in the long bone, and that's the epiphyseal plate. And so as our plates are open, they can constantly grow new bands of cartilage. And on the other side, ossify old bands of cartilage, thereby extending the length of our bones. They're also doing this along their width and making the bone wider, thus the term appositional. So appositional is like oppositional in that you're growing in length and in width. And we have to do a tricky thing, which is to maintain the proportions of the cavities and epiphyses. And so that creates a need for a dual purpose set of cells. And we'll talk about those in the next slide. And then finally, we have remodeling, and remodeling is going to be the last form of change, and that continues throughout your adult life. And that's where we're constantly reshaping bone and changing its density by either adding new tissue in areas of stress, strain, use, and additional force or gravity. So if we're using it a lot, we tend to fortify it and add layers to make it stronger. And if for some reason we stop using it in that high intensity kind of way, then we remove that tissue, right? And so we carve it away. And that remodeling is constantly changing in response to our own activities, which is really kind of cool. So how does this happen? Well, it's due in part to the action of two different types of bone cells. And the first is the osteoblast. Notice B for blast, B for building, B for Bob, right? Every time I give you something bolded and colored, you know that it's something that you need to know. So osteoblasts are bone building cells. Anytime I need to add bone tissue, anywhere, anytime, any process, I'm telling you, it's the osteoblasts that do it. Okay. Likewise, anytime I need to do the opposite and remove bone tissue and carve it away, C for clast, C for carving, and C for Clyde. Okay. So Clyde is the bone carving counterpoint to Bob the builder. Okay. And so he is going to be removing and carving away bone matrix. And as he chops it up, he's releasing the same building materials that Bob used to make that bone. And he not only chops it up and frees it up to just float around the body, he kind of vacuums it up as well and then transports it to the bloodstream so that it can go to another body system that needs calcium and phosphorus, or it can go circulate back to the bone and be used by building cells like osteoblasts. And so anytime we're doing any kind of bone change, growth, remodeling, or repair even, we have to use both osteoblasts and clasts at the same time. We're never going to have a process in the body that is healthy and natural where we're using only one type of cell to alter bone. If we do, then we end up with disease and disorder. So all of our diseases and disorders have to do with imbalances in the amount of activity of these two cells. If you have an overactive builder, then your bone density is going to be too thick. You're going to have the wrong shape, or maybe your bone is going to be too heavy, or you're going to have trouble in joints, mobility, or muscle attachments. If your osteoclasts are overactive, then they're going to be causing fragility in your bones. You're going to be more prone to breaking because they're creating little holes and pulling away tissue and thus pulling away strength from your bones. All right, so we need some ingredients to do this bone building activity, and they're the same ingredients. Remember that osteoclasts like Clyde are sucking out of bone anytime we make a withdrawal from the bone bank. And here's the three majors. One, we always start with a backbone of hyaline cartilage. So if there was no bone there before, if we start with like empty space and start building, we have to start with cartilage. However, once the cartilage is there, bone building is relatively easy. We only need two ingredients at that point. We need either calcium or phosphorus. And those are basically going to make that cartilage into hardened bone. It's the stuff that sets the bone into something solid and mineralized. So again, if we're starting from scratch, like building a skeleton for a fetus, we're going to start with hyaline cartilage, add the two minerals. If, however, we're talking about a bone that's already present, it's already built, and I don't need to add extra space, I'm probably just going to be depositing more calcium and phosphorus as opposed to having to add cartilage and then calcium and then phosphorus. Likewise, as a preview, if you had a break in the bone, you've separated the bone and now we have empty space, just like we did when we were building a fetal skeleton. And so to repair that bone, we're going to have to fill in the empty space with cartilage, then ossify it with calcium and phosphorus and make it hardened, right? And so look for that pattern of use and look for the dual use of Clyde and Bob, the osteoclast and blast, in all three of our bone changing or bone altering activities. Stay tuned for the detailed videos that follow. Read the handout on the learning materials or come to office hours for further clarification.